The cameras rolled inside a quiet studio. No audience, no applause. Just 2 chairs, 2 microphones, and a silence so heavy it could be felt through the lens. Meghan Markle had agreed to a one-on-one conversation with Dr. Jordan Peterson, the world-renowned psychologist famous for dissecting egos, ideologies, and human behavior with surgical precision. Neither of them knew that the exchange would end not in revelation, but in rupture. The set was intimate. Warm wood, bookshelves, soft lighting designed to soothe. Yet the air felt electric, charged with something unspoken. Meghan sat back, one leg crossed neatly over the other, a composed half-smile on her face. Her white blouse and deep burgundy blazer looked curated to the last crease. Her hair, loose and softly waved, framed a face that could pivot from charm to challenge in an instant. Across from her, Dr. Peterson sat straight-backed and serene, glasses perched low on his nose. His notes remained untouched. He preferred to watch first, analyze second, and speak last. "Thank you for being here, Meghan," he began, voice even. "You've spoken often about empowerment and self-expression. I'm curious, what do those words mean to you personally?" She tilted her head slightly as though asked to define something self-evident. "Empowerment," she said, voice syrupy smooth, "is about not having to explain yourself to men who think they already understand you." Jordan smiled faintly. "So empowerment is freedom from explanation?" "Exactly," she replied, eyes flashing. "Women spend their lives being dissected and questioned. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play along." He leaned forward slightly. "But isn't dialogue itself a form of empowerment? To engage, to articulate, to defend your beliefs. Doesn't that make them stronger?" She gave a soft, almost amused laugh. "You make it sound like a courtroom, Dr. Peterson. Not everything needs to be defended. Sometimes we just are." "That's a very postmodern view," he said after a pause. "But it assumes feelings can define truth. Do you think truth is subjective then?" Her smile faltered, only for a heartbeat. "Truth is personal. My truth may not be yours, but that doesn't make it less real," he nodded, unsurprised. "I hear that phrase often, my truth. But that's not truth. That's experience. Truth, by definition, transcends the personal." A flicker of irritation crossed her face. "Well, maybe in your definition, Doctor. But in the real world, especially for women, truth is shaped by what we've lived, not by someone else's theories." Jordan's voice stayed calm. "And yet, if everyone has their own truth, how do we ever share understanding? Or justice? Or even conversation?" She sighed, part amusement, part dismissal. "You love to complicate things, don't you?" "That's very academic of you." "I suppose I do," he said softly. "But that's how understanding begins, by looking deeply, not conveniently." Meghan crossed her arms. "Or maybe you just like hearing yourself talk. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it was meant to wound." He didn't flinch. "You seem frustrated," he said gently. "May I ask why?" She laughed again, the polished Hollywood kind, smooth and distant. "I'm not frustrated. I just find it fascinating how men like you always think they can diagnose women. You must be fun at parties." For the first time, his smile faded. "I'm not diagnosing you, Meghan. I'm observing the space between what you say and how you say it. It's revealing." Her tone softened into mock sweetness. "Oh, and what does it tell you, Doctor?" "That you've spent a long time mastering control. Over your image, your words, your reactions. But perhaps not as much time asking why you need to." Silence filled the room. Not awkward, but seismic. Meghan blinked once, twice, then smiled, a razor-thin smile. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose that's why I'm the one being interviewed, so I can be analyzed for everyone's entertainment." Jordan shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "So people can see something real." Her smile faltered. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the studio lights above. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted. Subtle but unmistakable. Meghan crossed her legs the other way, flicking an invisible strand of hair from her shoulder. The warmth in her expression vanished entirely. "If this is what you call insight," she said at last, I can see why people find you exhausting. Jordan exhaled slowly through his nose, unshaken. Perhaps, he replied. But sometimes exhaustion is the cost of honesty. The cameras kept rolling. The red lights above them glowed steady as heartbeats. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. Jordan glanced at his untouched notes, then back to her. You've said before that institutions often fail women, he began evenly. Yet you've also benefited from several: Hollywood, philanthropy, the press, when it suits. How do you reconcile critique with participation? Meghan's smile flashed sharp as glass. Is this the part where I'm accused of hypocrisy for existing in a world that wasn't designed for me? She folded her hands in her lap with practiced poise. Newsflash! You can critique a system while surviving it. I agree, Jordan said. Survival and critique aren't mutually exclusive. But clarity matters. Are you arguing for reform or exemption? She blinked, just once, surprised by the precision of his phrasing. I'm arguing, she said, leaning forward, that people like you overcomplicate what's obvious. Power corrupts, platforms exploit, and I refuse to be exploited. Refusal is a stance, he replied gently. It isn't yet a framework. If exploitation is everywhere, what would you build instead? Meghan tilted her head, as if contemplating the blueprints of a better world. A world where women don't have to justify wanting dignity, where respect is the default. Jordan nodded. A worthy North Star, he said. A beat. And how do you operationalize that? Respect in practice requires reciprocity. She laughed softly, a warm sound that didn't warm the room. You really love that word, don't you? Reciprocity, so tidy. What you mean is, be nice if you want nice. I mean, Jordan said, that if respect is only owed to you and not from you, it becomes a demand, not a principle. Or it becomes survival, she countered, her tone steel-edged now. Do you have any idea what it's like to be constantly judged for the same traits men are praised for? Ambition, control, gravitas. The words change when they stick to women. I do believe language can be weaponized, he said quietly. But we mustn't call all criticism violence or all disagreement erasure. Otherwise, conversation itself dies. Conversation dies, Meghan repeated, arching a brow. When the people with microphones decide what's acceptable to say and dress bias up as neutrality. Jordan studied her. Do you think I'm biased against you? I think, she said, each word polished and deliberate. You're attached to the idea that truth wears a lab coat and lectures in a hall. That any truth born of experience is childish until it's translated into your dialect. For the first time, something like grief flickered across his face, private, almost invisible. I've spent a lifetime listening to lived experience, he said softly. In clinic rooms, at hospital bedsides, in the aftermath of suicide. I ask hard questions not to shrink pain, but to keep people from drowning in it. She held his gaze a moment too long. You turn people into case studies, doctor, she said finally. Then hand them a framework and call it rescue. And you, he answered, not unkindly, sometimes rename absolution, and call that rescue. The silence between them tightened like a wire. Meghan broke it first, shifting in her seat, her posture dropping from poise to casual ease. Let me guess, she said lightly. Next you'll ask me about victimhood. Whether I've made a brand of it, commodified struggle. Her smile cut sideways. You wouldn't be the first. I was going to ask, Jordan said carefully, whether you see any tension between advocacy and attention. Whether advocacy can drift into performance without the advocate noticing. She clapped once, softly. There it is, Meghan said, voice edged like glass. The performance word. How comforting it must be to call a woman's presence performance. Even her pain, a dress rehearsal. I'd say the same to a man, Jordan replied calmly. To anyone. Intent can be genuine and still create perverse incentives, especially in public. In public? Meghan echoed, gesturing lightly toward the cameras. How convenient. You mean like right now? Where you get to play surgeon and I get to be the specimen. The difference, Jordan said, steady as ever, is that I invited you to articulate your principles, so the audience can evaluate them, not you. If you walk out unchanged but your ideas are clearer, that's still a service. She leaned back, her expression cooling. You want clarity? Fine. She began ticking off points on her fingers. Patriarchal media ecosystems extract women's narratives and sell them back as scandal. Power brokers reframe boundaries as ingratitude. And when a woman refuses to be pleasant on demand, she's diagnosed with deficient femininity. There's your clarity. Jordan absorbed it without blinking. That's a strong indictment, he said. Now define your terms. What's patriarchal media? Who are these power brokers? How do you measure extraction? If anyone who disagrees is a patriarch, you've built an unfalsifiable universe. Or a true one, she countered, smile thin and bright. Just because you can't falsify a waterline doesn't mean the flood isn't real. He almost smiled at that. Then point to the gauge, he said. Otherwise, we're trading poetry for policy. Oh, Jordan, she sighed theatrically. Must everything be a rubric? Maybe women are tired of taking tests you write. That's fair, he said. But tests also keep bridges from collapsing. A flicker, irritation, maybe recognition, crossed her face. She chose irritation. And yet bridges collapse all the time, she shot back. Maybe the men administering the test are too busy congratulating themselves to see the cracks. He raised a hand, not to stop her, but to slow the current. May I offer a reading? He asked. Not a diagnosis. An invitation, she gestured grandly. By all means. I adore invitations. You seem to equate scrutiny with hostility, he said softly. So you armor up. You anticipate contempt and meet it halfway with disdain. Not because you're cruel, but because you believe it's the only language contempt understands. The risk is that you start speaking to everyone as if they've already condemned you. Her jaw flexed once, twice. Then came a small, incredulous laugh. You really can't help yourself, can you? Turn the woman into an archetype, the conversation into a couch. I'm trying to keep it human, he said gently. Not heroic, not monstrous. Just human, human, she snapped, sudden heat in the syllables. Human would have been, Meghan, tell me what hurt. Not, Meghan, defend your thesis. His eyes softened, the kind of soft the cameras would miss, but she didn't. What hurt? He asked. The words landed like a bell in an empty church. She inhaled, then smiled too quickly. How quaint, she said lightly. A therapeutic pivot. We won't be doing that. Why not? His voice was almost a whisper. Because then you win, she said plainly. You get to make me legible, and I prefer to remain mine. He sat back, hands folding on the armrest. Legibility isn't surrender, he said. It's the price of being known, or the prelude to being owned, she countered. No, thank you. He nodded once tightly. All right. Then let's stay with ideas. He picked up his pen, then set it down without writing. You said earlier that dignity shouldn't require justification. How does that principle square with calling your critics irredeemable, machines, gossips, bigots? Doesn't dignity for you require a denial of theirs? That assumes they arrived with dignity, she shot back. Some people forfeit the benefit of the doubt, he said evenly, just by disagreeing with you? By refusing to understand me, she said, the heat rising again. By insisting their frameworks trump my experience. By asking me to prove me. That's not an answer, Jordan said quietly. That's a circle. It's a boundary. It's a moat, he replied. And you're burning your own bridges to keep out enemies who might have been neighbors. She laughed, short, incredulous. I'm sorry, are we now blaming me for the fact that some people are cruel? No, he said after a pause. I'm inviting you to notice how often you preempt cruelty with contempt. It works, for a while. You never bleed first, but it also means you never truly connect. For a fraction of a second, her eyes betrayed something like fatigue. Then the mask slid back into place. Flawless, deliberate. You mistake selective access for isolation, she said coolly. I connect with those who deserve it. And who decides who deserves you? I do. The certainty in her voice filled the room. Jordan drew a slow breath, the kind taken before lifting something heavy. That's sovereignty, he said. It can be noble. It can also be lonely. Better lonely than small, she said. Or, he murmured, better humble than hardened. The air vibrated with the clash of those two words. Lonely versus hardened. Better versus better. Neither moved. A soft knock sounded from behind the camera wall. A time cue. 5 minutes left in the segment. Meghan leaned toward the lens, a controlled sparkle in her eyes. "Tell you what, Doctor," she said breezily. "You keep your frameworks, I'll keep my life. Then we can both sleep at night." Jordan regarded her for a long beat. "I hope you do sleep," he said quietly. "Truly?" She smiled, and without warmth. "Oh, I sleep beautifully," he nodded, as if filing away an answer that revealed nothing. "All right then," he said. "One final question for this block." He folded his hands. "If your goal is a culture of respect, what risk are you willing to take to build it? One that doesn't involve humiliating your opponents." Her lashes flickered, the smallest tell of surprise, but her gaze never wavered. "I'll risk being called arrogant," she said finally, "because sometimes the only way to claim respect in a world that won't give it is to take it." Jordan's face was unreadable. "And if the world you build is full of people who all took first and asked later?" Her smile thinned. "Then at least we'll be honest about what it takes." The red light above the camera blinked twice. End of segment. "Back in 30, a voice called softly. Jordan exhaled through his nose, straightening a page he didn't need. Meghan adjusted a cuff that didn't require adjusting. The quiet returned, thick with unspoken things, and when the light went solid again, the storm edged closer. The studio clock ticked past the 30-minute mark, but the air already felt like the aftermath of a 3-hour debate. The second half began with deceptive calm. Two professionals under soft light, porcelain mugs untouched between them. Yet beneath the surface, the room pulsed with restrained hostility. Jordan leaned forward, tone measured. "In your recent interviews," he began, "you've spoken often about reclaiming narrative control. I'm curious, does control itself ever become a form of captivity?" Meghan laughed. Smooth, practiced, the kind made for red carpets, not reckonings. "Captivity?" she echoed, crossing her legs. "I think some men have an obsession with framing women as trapped the moment they show authority. It's almost adorable." Jordan nodded, unfazed. "It's not a gendered question. Everyone who seeks control risks becoming its prisoner. The tighter you grip the narrative, the less room there is for truth to surprise you." "Or maybe," Meghan said, "I've just learned not to let people like you twist my words. I've seen what happens when I leave too much room. The press fills it with fiction." "That's a valid fear," he said evenly. "But fear isn't a compass. It's a warning. If you build your map around it, eventually the warning becomes the walls." She tilted her head, smirk flickering. "You sound like a man who enjoys the sound of his own metaphors." "Maybe," he said with a faint smile. "But that doesn't make them untrue." She leaned back, clearly unamused. "Here's the problem, Doctor. Men like you think introspection solves everything. You love telling people to look inside as if they haven't already been dissected by 1,000 critics." Jordan's voice softened, almost weary. "And yet, looking inward is still less painful than pretending you've already arrived at wisdom." She exhaled sharply through her nose, half laugh, half scoff. "You really can't help yourself, can you? Always the professor, even when you're cornered." "I don't feel cornered," he said. "I feel concerned." "There's a difference." Something flashed in her eyes. Disbelief, maybe contempt. "Concerned about me?" "About the cost of cynicism," he said quietly. "Mock sincerity long enough and you forget what it sounds like. Then no one can reach you. And worse, you can't reach them." She gave him a look of polished pity. "You sound like a man who thinks I need saving." How charmingly patriarchal. "I don't think you need saving," Jordan said, gaze steady. "I think you need listening. But listening is impossible when every question sounds like an insult." Her jaw tightened, but the smile stayed. "I think we've reached the point where you're psychoanalyzing me, Doctor. Should I lie down on the couch now? You can stay seated, he replied mildly. Deflection works best upright. Her laughter filled the studio, bright, brittle, almost cutting. You're not used to women talking back, are you? I'm used to conversation, Jordan said. This doesn't feel like one. That line hung in the air like heat before lightning. The soft studio lights suddenly felt harsher, like interrogation lamps. Meghan crossed her arms, feigning ease. Maybe that's because you expect people to answer like they're on trial. You don't talk with people, Doctor. You talk at them, maybe, he said quietly. But maybe that's because too many people come to these talks wanting applause, not dialogue. Her expression hardened. You mean me, don't you? I mean the persona that replaces you when you feel threatened, Jordan said. The one that mocks before it thinks. It's impressive. It keeps you safe. But it also keeps you alone. For a fleeting second, the mask cracked. There was a flicker of something raw, hurt, pride, memory, gone as quickly as it appeared. Alone, she echoed, voice low, steady. Do you think that's some kind of revelation? Some insult? I've been alone in rooms full of people since I was 22. Don't flatter yourself by thinking you're the first man to notice. I wasn't trying to insult you, Jordan said quietly. I was trying to reach you. Reach me? She leaned forward, tone sharp now. You don't reach women like me, Doctor. You observe us. You categorize us. You turn us into cautionary tales for your lectures. Don't pretend this is empathy. It's performance. His eyes softened, though his jaw stayed firm. If this were performance, he said evenly, I'd have rehearsed better comebacks. I'm just asking questions that demand reflection, not applause. Reflection? She muttered, shaking her head. What you call reflection, I call condescension. He sighed, not defeated but weary. You interpret challenge as disrespect. That's the trap of resentment. It turns every mirror into an attack. Maybe I'm tired of mirrors built by men, she snapped. And maybe you're tired of seeing your own reflection, he said gently. That one landed. For once, she didn't hide it. Her lips parted, the faintest tremor breaking her composure. She recovered quickly, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. This is exactly why people find you infuriating, she said, voice sharp again. You pretend to understand women, but all you do is reduce them to emotions. Understanding isn't reduction, Jordan replied, calm and deliberate. It's confrontation. I confront patterns because ignoring them is how we repeat them. Maybe you should confront your own pattern, she shot back. The one where every woman you can't control becomes a case study. He blinked slowly, letting the accusation settle. Control isn't my goal, he said. But you seem preoccupied with it. Because I've lived my entire life being told what to say, what to wear, how to smile, how to exist, she snapped. You have no idea what it's like to carry that every single day. Jordan nodded slowly. Then why spend so much energy proving you don't care? The constant defense suggests the wound still bleeds. That did it. The first real crack. Her smile vanished. Her voice dropped. Colder now, sharper. You don't get to talk about my wounds, she said. You haven't earned that right. He folded his hands, calm again. Maybe you're right, he said softly. But you came here to talk about authenticity. Authenticity demands vulnerability and not branding. Branding? She repeated, voice cutting. You think I'm a brand? I think you've been taught to treat your story like one, he said. And I think it's killing the very empathy you say you defend. Meghan's nostrils flared. You're unbelievable. He inclined his head slightly. I hear that a lot. For a moment, silence thickened between them. The camera operator glanced nervously toward the booth. Everyone knew this was no longer just an interview. It was a philosophical knife fight dressed as civility. Finally, Meghan leaned back, voice low and edged. You think you've got me figured out, don't you? Jordan shook his head. No. I think you're terrified that someone might. Her eyes narrowed. You enjoy this, don't you? Watching people squirm under your microscope. I don't enjoy suffering, he said, but I believe truth redeems it. Well, Meghan said, forcing a smile, maybe the truth is that people like you are the reason people like me build walls. He looked at her for a long, steady moment. Then maybe it's time to ask whether those walls are keeping you safe or keeping you small? She didn't answer. just stared. That dazzling but brittle composure trembled at the edges. The clock ticked. 2 professionals, 2 languages. The air thickened, not just tense, heavy. The polite rhythm had dissolved into silence too fragile to touch. The cameras kept rolling, but no one dared breathe too loudly. Meghan sat rigid, chin high, arms folded across her burgundy blazer, eyes fixed on Jordan with courtroom precision. Jordan sat motionless, a stillness that wasn't silence, but judgment disguised as grace. The red light blinked back on for the final segment. Jordan spoke first, carefully. "Before we close," he said, "I want to ask one last question, not to provoke, but to understand. You've often spoken about compassion, but what does compassion mean when it stops at the boundary of self?" Meghan gave a small, humorless smile.
I knew it.
"You always have to end on something moral, don't you? Compassion, humility, redemption, your favorite trinity," he chuckled faintly. "I suppose so," Jordan said mildly. "But they're worth revisiting." "Well," she replied, crossing one leg over the other, "compassion means refusing to tolerate abuse, no matter how politely it's delivered." Jordan's brow creased. "Do you think this conversation has been abusive?" "I think," she said sharply, "it's been revealing." He tilted his head. "Of what?" "Of how men like you disguise condescension as curiosity," she said. "You ask questions that aren't questions, they're traps. You already think you know the answers." Jordan inhaled slowly, his gaze steady. "You think I'm attacking you," he said, "but what I'm doing is harder. I'm asking you to confront the contradictions in your own philosophy," she smirked. "And you think that makes you brave?" "No," he said quietly. "It makes me tired." That caught her off guard. "Just for a second." Then his voice sharpened, the warmth thinning. "You've turned defiance into a brand. You mistake resistance for strength and defensiveness for wisdom. Every time someone tries to meet you halfway, you accuse them of arrogance. That's not empowerment, Meghan. That's isolation, wrapped in applause." Her jaw tightened. "You're unbelievable. You sit there pretending to be this enlightened scholar, when really you're just another man who can't handle a woman challenging your worldview." "I can handle challenge," he said, his tone hardening for the first time. "What I can't handle is contempt disguised as intellect," her eyes flashed. "Contempt? You think I'm the one being contemptuous?" "I think," Jordan said, leaning forward, "you've been validated for so long that honesty now feels like cruelty." The line hit like a slap. The silence afterward was absolute, so heavy even the lights seemed to hum quieter. Meghan blinked once, then gave a short, incredulous laugh. "You've really rehearsed this, haven't you?" The wise old psychologist putting the rebel duchess in her place. It's textbook Jordan Peterson. Moralize the woman until she looks hysterical. Jordan's patience finally cracked. His voice stayed level, but the edge was unmistakable. "What's hysterical, Meghan, is confusing boundaries with attacks. I've treated soldiers, addicts, people standing at the edge of despair. None of them ever told me accountability was an insult. Only narcissists do that." Her composure fractured. The smile vanished. "Excuse me?" she said, voice icy. "I said," he continued calmly, "you deflect every question that threatens your image. You use charm to dodge truth and indignation to silence criticism. You came here to be praised, not understood. How dare you?" she said, rising halfway from her chair. "You don't know me?" He didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "But you've spent the last hour proving that no one really does because you won't let them." For a brief, raw second, she froze, eyes wide, lips trembling, words failing her. Then the wall came back up perfect and cold. "You know what?" she said, voice like glass. "This isn't an interview anymore. It's an ambush. An ambush happens when you don't expect honesty," Jordan said, sitting back. "I've given you nothing else. You're projecting," she snapped. "You get off on tearing people down to prove how smart you are." Jordan took a slow breath and turned his gaze toward the camera. Not to her, not to the crew, but to the unseen audience beyond. "You see," he said evenly, "this is what happens when self-awareness collapses into self-admiration. It's the tragedy of our time, people mistaking defiance for depth." "Don't lecture me," Meghan cut in, furious. I didn't come here to be patronized by a man who hides behind philosophy because he's afraid of emotion. Jordan turned back to her, voice quiet but razor sharp. And I didn't come here to host a monologue about moral superiority. You're not having a conversation, Meghan. You're performing one. Then maybe you shouldn't have invited me, she shot back, rising to full height. Maybe I shouldn't have, he said firmly. The silence that followed was brittle, final, the kind of silence that breaks something permanent. Jordan removed his glasses and set them gently on the table. When he spoke again, his tone was calm, too calm. I've spoken with people from every walk of life. Some angry, some lost, some in pain. But this isn't dialogue. It's a performance of deflection. And frankly, it's no longer productive. So I'm ending it here. Meghan blinked. End it? Yes, he said, standing now. Because I value integrity, mine and this platform's. I won't let this devolve into a theater of ego. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You're kicking me off your little show? He looked down at her, unblinking. No, Meghan. I'm freeing you from a conversation you never actually wanted to have. That one landed like a blade. Her face flushed crimson. You'll regret this, she hissed. You'll be called out for this arrogance. Jordan nodded once. If truth looks like arrogance to you, I'll wear it proudly. The cameras were still rolling when she yanked off her mic and dropped it onto the table with a sharp metallic click. Then she turned and strode out, heels echoing on the polished floor until the sound disappeared into silence. For a long moment, Jordan didn't move. Then he looked back into the camera, his voice steady but grave. Ladies and gentlemen, he said quietly, what you've just witnessed is the collapse of conversation under the weight of ego. Let it remind us, intellect without humility isn't wisdom. It's vanity wearing a crown. He gave a small nod. Thank you for watching. The red light blinked off. The room went still. Even the crew knew. It wasn't just an interview that had ended, but an illusion.